my body. Every size, every line, every girl, every guy, everybody who don't identify.
Hello my loves, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new here. Hi, hello, my name is Loey. So full disclosure, I have been playing way too much Animal Crossing. It's kind of an unhealthy obsession at this point. Earlier today I did tally it up and I have actually purchased 10 copies of Animal Crossing New Horizons for the Nintendo Switch. I bought one copy for myself. I gave away 3 digital copies on Twitter to some of you guys. I gave away one to my brother, and then the rest have been like gifts for friends, gifts for my family to make them play with me. I am very much so in love and obsessed with Animal Crossing. However, I have not played that much since the GameCube version of the game. Of course, I mean like until now, until the Switch release came out, I've been playing this one all the time, but I didn't really play any of the titles in between the original OG early 2000s GameCube game to now. I think I sunk in about 20 hours on New Leaf in total over the span of like the 5 years that I've had my 3DS. If any of y'all know Animal Crossing, you know 20 hours is like nothing. That's literally like base setup time for your house and maybe paying off a loan or two. While I never really took the time to invest in the other games in the Animal Crossing series, one thing that has always fascinated me are the horror-themed towns available on Animal Crossing New Leaf. Now, Animal Crossing New Leaf put out, I think this was an entirely new concept at this point. The concept was essentially that if you had gotten like decently far ahead in the game, you could actually enter what is called a dream address of another player's town. Now, you couldn't interact with them when you did this, like you couldn't go to their town the way that we can now in New Horizons and like play with them and do things with them, but you could visit their town when you are in this like dream state. So it's almost like a snapshot of their town. Because this was so open-ended, I think it was just inevitable that some people would do some kind of creepy stuff with it. But as a result, all of these horror towns were born, and some of them range from just a little bit spooky to downright gory. Yes, you heard me, gory in an Animal Crossing game. So it might seem sort of weird to take a step back away from New Horizons, which has been so long in the making, back into the last 3DS title of Animal Crossing to look at some of these horror titles. I don't really know if we're going to have anything quite like these in Animal Crossing New Horizons. The technology now makes it so that we can visit each other as we're playing. One of my best friends came over to my island the other day and all we did was like sit on a bench and boot feet. Like we didn't do anything else. Truly Animal Crossing at its finest, if you ask me. However, now you don't really have the option to walk through a horror themed town or just walk through at your own leisure a town like this. You have to have a dodo code or be friends with somebody on the Switch. Creators of some of these horror towns have said that they are remaking them in New Horizons, but I'll be very curious to see how they go about inviting people or having people tour them, etc. All that to say, today I'm going to be looking at 3 horror towns from Animal Crossing New Leaf. Buckle your seatbelts because these get really weird. Also, full disclaimer, I don't have my 3DS with me right now. It's in California and I'm not going near an airport at the moment. Even if I did have it, I don't actually have a 3DS that's like capable of recording gameplay that I can then get onto my laptop. So I'm relying pretty heavily on other gameplay videos as well as Tumblr for the most part for the walkthroughs of these scary towns. The first town, and arguably the most famous scary horror town in Animal Crossing, is Aika Village, and I've heard it pronounced differently, but I'm going to be referring to it as Aika Village. I'm looking at the Tumblr user Garnet Crossing's post for a lot of the reference on how they walked through this town. Some of the Animal Crossing horror towns, you can just like wander around and go into different houses to kind of gather the story that the creator wants to tell, but Aika Village is much more rigid in the paths that it wants you to take so that it can perfectly explain to you what happened in the life of Aika, who is the main character of this story. In the Dream Suite in Animal Crossing, when you go to someone else's town, you go to sleep and you wake up in a dream in their village. Upon waking up in this dream, the Tumblr user encountered Aika in the village square. She then told them how much she loves her mother. Sweet enough. There are various houses in most of these horror towns that are really set out to tell these stories. You don't have a lot of control over villager houses, and you can decorate the outside. Most of the storytelling occurs within the walls of these homes. Upon entering the first home, you will find a bright and cheery scenery. There are mannequins set out to portray a happy family celebrating a birthday. One thing that's interesting to note is the dresser in the background of this photo that is covering up a room. Now, somebody actually activated a bunch of cheats and went back there, but in that room, which you're not supposed to be able to access in this walkthrough, you will find a bunch of toilets and baskets of food, which is really weird. Upstairs in Aika's bedroom are a bunch of portraits she's painted of herself and her family, as well as her toys. Overall, a really bright and cheerful house, and I think if you had just kind of walked into it in any other circumstance, you might not think anything was off about it. There are so many moving parts to Aika Village. It is literally the most famous Animal Crossing horror town, at least I think it is. So I'm not going to be describing everything in detail here. There are so many walkthroughs here on YouTube if you want to see it in its entirety. There are mazes throughout the town that really guide you on the path that Aika wants you to travel. You might encounter a gravestone in one corner of the map, as well as a full-blown cemetery in another part. If you enter the police station, you will find that the Lost and Found is filled with beehives for some reason. But when you enter the second house, it is a much different scene from the first one. The lights are off in the main room, and you have to go through a maze of chairs and neon green running signs in order to encounter anything within the home. In one of the rooms, there are statues of Adam and Eve, as well as the forbidden fruit and the snake, which I thought was really interesting. In the weirdest room in this house, there is all of these toys, all of Aika's toys, facing away from the player character. If you manipulated the camera so that you could look at the back wall of this room, you would find these hyper-realistic, creepy eyes staring at the toys, and that's probably what they're turned away from. When entering the next home, you are greeted by a doll with an axe in a bookshelf maze, and if you turn the camera, you will find yet another doll waiting for you in this maze. There are rooms filled with things like picture books, a four-leaf clover, all of these random papers strewn out on the floor. Yet another room shows a red doll staring at a TV screen filled with static, as well as photos drawn of Aika's mother. Now, one of the cool mechanics of the Dream Suite was that when you visited these towns, you could encounter the player character while you're just traversing through their home or around their home. They're all programmed to say one specific thing, and in each of the homes so far, Aika would talk about how much she loved her mother. In this one, she struggled to even say the word love, but here we have a room filled with images of her mom. There's so much imagery and scenery to go through with this town that we could be here for hours discussing it, but one of the main key components of the final house is that Aika will only speak gibberish when you speak to her outside of this home. She can't say anything at all. And then when you go in, there's many bizarre scenes. Once again, we have the doll with the axe, as well as this room from before, Aika's room with all of the pictures, but now Aika is crossed out, as is her pet dog. Upon traveling down to the very end of this Animal Crossing map, you will find red shoes on the beach, the same ones that Aika always wore. It's been said that in Japanese tradition, if a person is going to take their own life, they take off their shoes so that they do not bring them into the afterlife. And then once again, we see the grave surrounded by treats and flowers. So pretty bizarre, heavy stuff for an Animal Crossing game, but a lot of people theorize that the entire purpose of this map was to tell the story of a young girl who is being controlled by her mother. The toilets and food that were hidden away in a room that we couldn't access without heavily cheating the system might depict a mother who heavily controls what her child eats. There seems to be this young girl who who idolizes her, who loves her to the point that she's made her the town flag and draws all these photos of her. But then in the end, Aika and her dog, who was her only friend, are both gone. Next up, and this is from the Tumblr blog Nightmare Investigator, we have the town of Moonveil. On this blog it says, according to the creator of this town, Moonveil is a gruesome tale of tragedies between a married couple. Upon waking up, when you go to the house on the left side of the map, the owner of it says this, so big yikes. This map tends to use mannequins to really portray its stories. So you have scenes like the first one when you walk into the house and all of the lights are off in this home, so it's kind of hard to see. But you have a girl talking to a boy who is turned away from her and does not seem to be listening. There are other bizarre rooms like this hospital room with a creepy demon mask hanging above the door, potentially signifying that a sick child was born or that somebody was living in a hospital at the time. The basement is by far the creepiest, filled with things like this and random icons of a man on the wall. By far the creepiest touch was the two headless, bloodied mannequins sitting in the far corner of the room. Yikes. So it looks like the person that we encountered outside of this home was the daughter, and she was the one who killed her mom and dad. Upon going to the next home, we encounter what this Tumblr user theorizes is the mother of this situation. She's wearing pretty like traditional mom clothes, just, you know, covered in blood, and also wearing a super creepy mask. This next house is super run down, surrounded by grates and dead trees, but upon going inside, there's some pretty creepy stuff to be seen. 100% that looks like a mannequin head on the floor wearing the same mask that the mom was, which is really weird. There are demons hanging above the wall. Moving on, there is a little like grave site and there's a thing to dig up. Upon digging it up, you find a mama panda. The third house features a young, very innocent looking girl who simply says, Mama? Maybe this is the girl before she went on her murderous spree and killed her parents. But when you enter the house, it looks like there is a funeral happening. Some really creepy stuff in here includes this portrait of the two parents being happy and in love in this random picture that you have to turn the camera to see. And then the child is in the back really unhappy seemingly. There's a lot of imagery in this town that points to the daughter being really ill or sick, and there's more stuff in a kid's room in this house. Wandering through this town, you will find things such as skeletons and a matronly bun. Much like in the last town, this one ends off with finding the same boots that the girl was wearing next to the ocean, signifying that after she carried out her murders and left those two skeletons behind, she may have taken her own life. So, once again, really freaking weird. The thing with a lot of these towns is that they're super open to interpretation, and you might have a totally different story to take away from walking through these dream towns than this Tumblr user did, or even I did interpreting the photos. I think it's just super jarring to see such creepy imagery in such a light and happy and fun video game. Last but certainly not least, and this might be my favorite one, I have watched so many walkthroughs of this town. This is Hitokui Village, and I think I'm saying that correctly. I might not be. It might just be Hitoku. Regardless, this is the cannibal village, and fair warning, there is a lot of gory scenery ahead for an Animal Crossing game. Keep in mind it's all pixels, but still a lot to take in. My walkthrough for this one comes from Tank Top Camo on Tumblr. I also watched the Misha Crossing video that she uploaded a year ago, walking through the cannibal town. Now, upon entering the town, you find two outfits that you can choose to wear. One is a police officer uniform, and the other is a bridal costume. I'm assuming the police officer uniform just signifies that you are a cop, kind of like walking through this gruesome scene. But if you wear the bridal uniform, it kind of signifies that you are the fourth victim of this saga. So there are houses in this town, such as this one, which looks like a church upon entering it. There's organs and a pew system. And when you go behind the like front sort of altar area, you find things like a cemetery, as well as this room with what looks like a sacrifice. Super weird. Behind one of the next houses that we'll look at, which is the restaurant, there are items like shearling boots, a sweater dress, and brown glasses buried. The brown glasses are actually the same as the ones that Kozu, the owner of that last house that was like a church, wears. Speaking of Kozu, if you look at her from behind, you will see that there is a massive slash in her back, so that's great. Speaking of the restaurant, if you enter into the next house, you will actually find what looks like a cafe. There is a lot of food being cooked and different rooms where you can eat your meals, as well as some cool tables and stuff. However, if you go to the basement, there is really creepy stuff like knives surrounded by blood, cribs in a corner, which is pretty disturbing. There is a creepy little skeleton if you look in the very far back of this corner, and there is blood trickling from the walls. So unfortunately, this is a cannibal restaurant. They cook people. They're victims here. The next house features a creepy man covered in bandages. His name is Zoru, and he says, "Won't escape, hee hee, hee 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 hee." Which is great. Basically, it looks like he is a doctor of sorts. His house contains various skeletons and models of people, like doctors' chairs, etc. There are animals in here, which we might assume he is using as test subjects for experiments. Another room in this house is fully red with a glitched out TV and a body that is red on the bed, and the creepy doll from Aika Village. Hey, there's so many different details in so many areas of these towns. At so many points you can dig up things like a creepy skeleton depicting that somebody was murdered or buried there. This one seems to feature like a lot of demonic things, such as creepy photos hidden away in different corners. There are areas in Hitokui Village in particular, such as this like dungeon area covered in crosses that are bleeding, as well as help written on the walls, as well as like an altar to what looks like a demon of sorts. But the scariest part about this one is that as you are running through the map, there is the possibility of running into a pitfall, and if you are the bride or in the bride uniform, it signifies that you are the last victim of this story. So hopefully that all made sense. These are really like ambiguous towns and kind of stories left up to interpretation, but hopefully I did an okay job of explaining some of the scarier details and the darker details of these Animal Crossing villages. I do hope you all enjoyed. If you did, go ahead and give me a thumbs up, and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I love you guys, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.